1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12 says, "Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he" what? "Fall." Proverbs 16:18, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before" what? "A fall." We've all dealt with that, right? A haughty spirit is beyond like a healthy self-image, right? It is beyond feeling okay about yourself and the normal self-confidence. It is an arrogant behavior and lifestyle. When you're haughty, you actually think you're better than other people. Not just that you have a better idea, but I'm a better person than you. I'm a higher standing person than you are. You feel superior and you look down on people. One dictionary puts it this way: a haughty people are disdainful, overbearing, prideful, swaggering, and obnoxious. Isn't that all of us once in a while? Or is it just me? I think we're all there. We all have our moments, right? How many times have you seen that lived out? Maybe in other people, but how many times have you lived this out? It could have been a moment. Hopefully it's not a lifestyle. If it is, this might be a difficult day for you. If it's momentarily, hopefully today you'll be challenged to make it less moments, in your life, that it pops up less often. Usually it's about the time you have it all figured out, that you think you have it all figured out, that's when you fall. That's when something happens. Okay, honesty, right? Can I be transparent with you for a moment? I don't know if I've ever said this out loud before. It's not in my notes, so I shouldn't be talking. After 3 semesters of Bible college, I started preaching. So I was like a seasoned, right? I knew it all at that point. 20 years old, and I started preaching full time. I haven't stopped since then. At a little church on the east side of town here. And I remember when we got to the preaching class, because I'm going to college, obviously simultaneously by preaching. Part of the whole learning how to preach thing is you start with a beginning, like, get their interest. You got to do something. That's why, like in the 80s, everybody told jokes, or it was usually corny. Like, you're supposed to be pulling the audience, and right. And I literally thought to myself, I don't really need that because it's me. Seriously? all they need to know is I'm getting on up to speak, and they got them already. That honestly went through my mind in class. That didn't take me long to figure out that is about the dumbest thing. It was the whole pride before the fall thing. It wasn't a few like total failure messages. I was like, okay, maybe I'm not that much. we all deal with this, especially when you're like 20 and think you got it all figured out. Nothing against 20-year-olds. I'm just saying, I've been there. It's about the time, I don't know how many times I've talked to husbands or wives that think, man, I am a really good husband or wife, that usually the other spouse is about the time they step up and say, man, things are about to fall apart. And they're like, whoa, they weren't expecting that because they'd kind of relaxed a little bit. They thought, I got this down. I'm the perfect husband. I'm the perfect wife. And the others, and their spouse is like, nah, not so much. It's the pride that comes before the fall. It's about the time you think you're about the best person in your office or work group, however you're organized at work, and you're thinking, I'm at the top. There's no one really better than me. About that time, I don't know if it's a subconscious thing, you start to relax or something, but you just feel pretty much you're it. And then whether maybe it's the new guy that comes in and starts excelling and they get the promotion over you, and you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. I'm the top. Why can't you see that? And then you struggle with that. Our egos can get us into so much trouble. So much trouble. And we all deal with ego, but man, it can get us in trouble. There's a story in the Old Testament. It's familiar probably to many of you. Matter of fact, if you were familiar with a lot of the songs we sung, you're like, oh yeah, I know this story, because it's like it means you've been around a while, right? It's in the Old Testament about a very successful king. And here's the stick figures that Todd didn't know we had stick figures today. It's a boastful king. He's a very proud king. I had to find a proud stick figure. He's looking pretty arrogant right there. And he was very successful. And he brought all of his nobles and all the officials and all the leaders, military leaders, all these people in the land together. And for 6 months, he displayed his vast wealth and successes to all these people. He paraded in front of them over and over again, his gold, his spices, his silver, the bronze he had, the jewels, his servants. Look at all these servants I have. They're the best servants in the world. They're mine, and he was just boasting the whole time. His weapons, he paraded before him, before the leaders and nobles of other lands, his military weapons. And day after day, he paraded these items in front of the leaders, showing how awesome he is. He's the king. He accomplished this. this. He's the most wonderful guy ever. How much, he had succeeded. And after 6 months of arrogantly showing off his trophies, he held a feast at the end of that lasted for 7 days straight, bringing in the best food, the best drink, the best everything, right? And so he's 7 days into this feast. He's been drinking like a wild man, eating like a whatever, and his judgment, let's say, is impaired. Would you think so after 7 days? I mean, it's like usually 24. I mean, they really went after this thing, right? His drinking, or his judgment is a little impaired, a lot impaired, and his pride is even taken over more because he's been telling about how awesome he is for 6 months. And he had what he thought was the greatest idea ever. I will call my wife, Vashti, the pride and joy, to come in and present herself to these people to show how really awesome I am, because look at my wife, and to do some type of seductive public dance for them. Well, the queen responds with an emphatic no, okay, which doesn't go over well, because that hit right at the ego. Nobody says no to me. I'm the king. You don't understand. So she loses her crown. She's no longer the queen. They do a quick, well, it's actually pretty slow, pretty long, involved beauty contest to find out who the next queen will be, and enter Esther is chosen. Long story short. By the way, read Esther. If you don't know the story, I'm really, really shortening it today. It's only a few chapters long. Read it this week. It's a fantastic story. In the midst of the story, there's this guy named Haman, and he is the highest official in the land next to the king, right? He's also arrogant, using the arrogant stick figure that I found. He thinks it's pretty cool because everybody has to bow down to him. So he parades around through the city, through the countryside, and everywhere he goes, people have to bow down to him. All the nobles, all the high officials. Only the king doesn't have to bow down to him. So he's pretty high up there. He thinks he's better than everyone else. His ego's in charge here. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He is it, right? And so he loves seeing people bow down to him. But there's one guy who doesn't, a guy named Mordecai, who happens to be a relative of Esther. And Mordecai's just a dude, right? So he's just a stick figure. And he doesn't bow down to Haman, and it hits Haman's ego pretty hard. It's like, you're supposed to bow down to me. Everybody bows. I mean, you die if you don't bow down to me. That's how this works. And so Haman now, he's all worked up. Mordecai's not bowing. He finds out, Haman does, that Mordecai is a Jewish person, and so he's just going to wipe them all out. He says, I'll show you. He convinces the king to set a decree that to kill all the Jews. And in Esther chapter 3, verse 13, they send out this message all across the land, and on the 13th day of the 12th month, they are to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all Jews, not just Mordecai, all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, and plunder their goods. Little ego involved? This is because a dude won't bow down to him. He's going to wipe out an entire nation. And it's law now. It's official. We're going to wipe out everybody. So, again, very long story, very much shortened. Esther comes up with a plan to save the people. It involves feeding into Haman's ego. It all comes to a head in chapter 6 when the king is reminded about a time that Mordecai actually saved the king's life. And he's like, wait, did we ever do anything for this guy? No, I don't see anything in the record book. Well, what should I do? Haman happens to be around. And so one day he randomly asks Haman the question, hey, what should be done for the man? See, it's even in comic book quotes, right? What should be done for the man who the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? Arrogant? The king, I want to honor someone. Well, it must be me. Is there anyone better? This guy his ego's out of control. His arrogance is out of control. He's the definition of haughty, right? I mean, he's this guy. He's thinking, this is going to be great. I'm an awesome guy. The king knows I'm an awesome guy. The people think I'm awesome. They all bow down to me. I know, I'm just awesome. So I got to come up with something good. So he's thinking about what would be the perfect thing to be done for someone who's as awesome as me. And he goes on in verse 7, and Haman says to the king, well, for the man who the king delights to honor, let the royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor. Let them lead him on a horse to the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So Haman's feeling really good. He's feeling like this is going to be such a wonderful thing. He's going to get new royal clothes. He's going to be paraded in front of everyone. He's going to once again feed into his ego even more, and everyone's going to be bowing down, and they'll be cheering for him. People are going to be screaming out how awesome he is. This is going to be the best day ever. He's got a good plan. And verse 10 says, Then the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robes and the horses you have said, and do so to Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing you've mentioned. And now it's become the worst day ever. Hit him right in the ego. This is the one guy who wouldn't bow down to him. This is the one guy Haman actually happened to, at that moment, be building gallows for. He was going to hang him publicly to make sure, not only kill him, but his entire race. He really had it out for this guy, simply because he wouldn't bow to him. And now he has to parade Mordecai through the streets, proclaiming how awesome this guy is. Man, you want to get someone, hurt him bad, do that. And long story short, Haman ends up in the very gallows he had built to kill Mordecai with. The Jews are saved from mass annihilation. Now again, read the story. If you don't know the story, most of you are probably familiar with it. If you haven't read it for a while, go back there and read it. It's so awesome. But this is, I think, the kind of thing that Solomon was talking about in Proverbs chapter 16 when he said, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Haman would have been fine if his pride hadn't got a hold of him, if his haughty spirit hadn't controlled him to the point of cause. He caused literally his destruction in life. It destroyed his life, took away his joy. I mean, the nations bowing before him, but he could not enjoy that because one guy wouldn't. That was pride. That was his ego. It took away his job. When the king fired him, ultimately took away his life. None of that would have happened if he kept his ego in check. None of that would have happened if he had kept his arrogance and his pride in check. Look at what the New Testament says. There are several verses. All of these should be familiar to us, but several places where New Testament writers are telling us, hey, control your ego. Control this emotion of pride that can come over you. First Peter writes, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Philippians, the Apostle Paul says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only at his own interests, but also the interests of others. Paul also writes in Ephesians chapter 4, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. The humility thing. Colossians 3, put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Put on, he says, humility. And in Acts 20, the Apostle Paul, who wrote several of the ones we just read, says, hey, I'm not just telling you to do this. This is my way of living this. I'm living this well. In Acts chapter 20, he says, you yourselves, you know how I lived among you the whole time from the first day I set foot in Asia, serving the Lord with all humility. Paul was humble. Now, pride's a legitimate emotion, right? I mean, we all have it. I mean, there are times you do a really good job at something, you sit back and think, hey, I'm glad that turned out okay. I'm good with that, okay? And you should feel good about it. It's okay to have a little pride in your work. I mean, this isn't like saying to destroy yourself and talk down to yourself all the time. Feel good about the stuff you do. We should strive to do our best at everything we do. It honors God, it honors people. It's just a good thing. The problem comes when we take that initial emotion and allow it then to become the definition of how we see ourselves. It moves us from, hey, I did an awesome job on that test or on that job assignment or whatever it is you did, to I am an awesome person. And quite honestly, I'm better than you. That's where the emotion grabs us and controls us. Feel the emotion, enjoy it, find pleasure in the fact of a job well done, but don't let that define. That doesn't mean you're better than other people. That's the fine line that we have to be careful about crossing. The Bible tells us over and over to humble ourselves. Humble ourselves. Even if you do all kinds of awesome things, you humble yourself. Don't let it get to your head. The word humble means not proud or haughty, not arrogant or assertive. Another reference book put it this way, lacking all signs of pride, aggressiveness, or self-assertiveness. And so Peter says to clothe yourself with humility. Be intentional about this. It's almost like you plan. You plan out your clothes, right? I mean, unless you're like a dude. But we don't always plan our clothes very well. But usually, it's not uncommon to look at the weather app and what's it going to be like today? Oh, it's going to be cold. I'll wear long sleeves, long pants, maybe a jacket. Oh, it's going to be 80. I think I'll wear short sleeves, shorts or something. You plan ahead how you're going to clothe. And Peter says to clothe yourself with humility. And the idea is to head into each day with a plan. I'm going to, even if I've totally knocked this thing out of the ballpark, whatever it is, the project you're doing, whatever it is, no matter how well I succeed, I'm going to do it humbly. You're planning ahead of time to be the humble person, even when you do awesome things. So when you dunk the basketball over someone's head, in the basketball game, you already know you're not going to pound your chest and look at the crowd and scream like, look at me. You're just going to assume, well, yeah, that was awesome. And I'm really cool. That was cool. I'm glad I did that, but I expected it. And you go on. You don't have to rub their nose in it. Or when you go to work, you already know that you're not going to undercut or undermine your coworkers in order to get ahead of them or to step on them to get a promotion. You're just going to head in with a plan to let your work ethic do the talking for you. Just work as hard as you can and let that speak. You don't have to, cheat and claw your way to the top by hurting other people. Seems like we're taught our whole lives, so everybody tends to live this way, this philosophy that I will believe in myself because I'm an awesome person. We spend so much time building people up and making them feel good about themselves that maybe we go too far as a culture. Look out for number one because, you're awesome, so you got to fight for your rights, right? You don't have to let anybody get in your way. You fight. You're better than other people. That's this attitude that we're pretty much brought up with. Wouldn't it be cool, though, to be the refreshing person in the school or in the office who follows the teaching of Jesus when he says things like, well, hey, if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. That's the opposite of pride and ego. Now, you know the story there, like the Roman soldiers during the days of Jesus, one of the perks is they could get anybody to just carry their stuff for a mile, kind of do the grunt work for them. Man, I want to carry my gear, carry this, and so you had to for a mile. And so the average Jew would do what they have to. They don't want to die, so they're going to follow the orders, but at 1 mile they would stop. It's like, okay, that's all I'm required, and they would stop right there. Can you imagine every step of that mile, the anger? I mean, because that's hitting the pride of the person carrying the stuff, right? These are oppressors in the land, the Roman soldiers, they don't like when I'm carrying your stuff. So each step was a dig into the ego of the person carrying the soldier's stuff. And Jesus shows up and he says, you know what, here's the deal. If a soldier asks you to carry something a mile, go ahead and carry it too. Blow them away. Carry it. Humble yourself and carry it too. You really want to show what a difference God's made in your life? You go 2 miles. Don't stop at 1. He's talking about intentionally, deliberately planning, clothing yourself with humility so that when that situation arises, you already know what you're going to do. If he asks me to carry that, I'm going to go 2. I'm going to go 2 miles. You've gone into it with that attitude. It's during the same teaching, Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, where Jesus says in verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, it's not talking about weak or acting like a wimp or walking around with your head down like I'm trying to be humble type of thing. Actually, it's the opposite here. It means strength under control. It means you have the ability to do more and you choose not to. The person who's intellectually superior, who chooses not to embarrass the person who's challenging them when they could. When they could. They choose just to let them have the little victory and feel good about it, right? The person who is physically superior, who chooses not to harm the inferior challenger, just kind of let it go. The person who's financially successful, who chooses not to play the social class game in a room full of people who are less financially blessed than they are. So Peter says, clothe yourself with humility. It's okay to succeed. It's okay to do well. It's okay to accomplish great things. Just don't let it get to your head. Clothe yourself with humility. Be deliberate. Be intentional about being humble. The Philippians text we read said to humbly consider others better than yourself. That's that idea of yielding to them, yielding. Again, it's the financially successful person being considerate enough to not talk about their success around those who might be struggling at the time. Maybe they've lost a job. Maybe they're just struggling, whatever. So I'm just not going to go in that conversation, Or the family with multiple children learning not to complain about their children in front of a couple maybe that is struggling with infertility, and they'd love to have your problems, Oh, no, you don't know how bad it is. And it's like, just kind of back off of that conversation. The student who excels in school, not gloating around the student who might be struggling and challenging, having a challenge, getting grades. Or the husband who knows when to stop pushing buttons, and the wife that knows when to lay off in a conversation. Wouldn't it be nice if in a conversation that big yield sign would pop up just to kind of say, whoa, that before you were in trouble? How many times you've gone too far and you're like, okay, now we just went. It would have been nice if that yield sign would have just popped up and backed me down. But it's not there unless you're up here mentally disciplined, knowing I'm going to go into this conversation humbly. I'm going to go into this any conversation without a haughty spirit or arrogance. But I'll come in as a servant to the person I'm talking to. Maybe I'll print up a yield sign that'll just pop up once in a while. I don't know. I don't think that'll work. Humility is learning when to yield. Have you ever thought about how amazing it is that God would take someone like yourself, like myself, arrogant, prideful, ungrateful, undeserving, us, right? And love us enough to choose us, to make us holy, and love us in spite of what he knows about us. Isn't that just amazing? That blows me away sometimes. Like, he knows everything. And he's like, I still love you. I know you're arrogant. I know what's in your heart. I know you're all the things, you can go down the list of what you are, what I am. I love you anyway. And the Bible says over and over again, yeah, that thing that God has done for you, go ahead and do that to other people. Love them in spite of their weaknesses. Love them in spite of their sins. Love them in spite of the ways they maybe let you down or disappoint you. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. There are no yield signs that'll pop up. But here's the deal. If you ever find yourself thinking, like I found myself early on preaching, maybe a little too high for yourself, it's a good time to stop yourself in your own tracks and take a step back and say, yeah, you're not all that much. I mean, good job, you've accomplished a lot, yada, yada, great, that's awesome, but I'm still just me. You got to remind yourself of that once in a while. And if you don't, trust me, someone will. And it'll be a lot more embarrassing. It just will. So I encourage you to go into life humbly, to assess yourself. You got to have people in your life who can pull you aside. It can't be just anybody. It has to be someone who's close to you, a spouse, a close friend, who will just say, dude, back off a little bit. We all need that. We all need that. Find that person in your life because it probably won't be you. It probably won't, because you'll be looking in the mirror going, yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's pray. Let's stand. Would you stand with